So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto and Rwby Got Harem. So let's start the series. It is painful. It seemed as though he was using his trademark spirit art, Harem, for the first time during his trial days. But this was much, much more painful. Something inside him was trying to hold him together, but it felt like he was being torn apart limb for limb. He was starting to believe that if the agony didn't go away, he would be in this state for the rest of his life. He surveyed the area. Despite his disorientation and severe injuries, he was able to clear his vision enough to look about. This was a place he had never seen before. It was dark, wet, and freezing. The closet appeared to be a worse version of every child's fear. He saw black space everywhere he looked, with what appeared to be stars scattered across the terrain. He could see the same stars on the other side of the ground, which appeared to be invisible. There was a slight mist around, but it acts strangely. It appears to be made up of several sentient entities because it moves in various directions. This leads him to another issue. He sensed chakra everywhere. At least in his world, everything has chakra, so this isn't very surprising, but it's still odd. It was similar to strolling through Hyde Ninja Village's town square, with various signatures, emotions, and capacities. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of a recognizable figure's back. As though evaluating him based on his value, it turned its head and gazed at him with its soulless eyes. Later, it swiveled its whole body in his direction. It then said, "Human, you have been removed from your own domain. Begone, for the price has been paid." Then, before he could even respond, Naruto's father felt anguish once more, as if he had been forcibly transferred. Something stirred inside him once more. Not his, but familiar. He was probably kept alive the first time he was transferred by the same method. For some reason, this second teleportation felt longer. He was eventually dumped from a hole in the sky. He fainted, confused and injured. New World is legendary. The father of Naruto felt genuinely alone for the first time in his life. There was no one else in sight as he lay on black, scorched grass surrounded by greener ones. Compared to his childhood, it was different. Compared to his time on the front lines, when he lived while his fellow soldiers perished, this was different. It was a far cry from his time spent traveling alone on extended trips. His thoughts were racing with all the people he had left behind, including his wife, son, teacher, predecessor, and everyone else. He had not succeeded. He prayed that the Sandaime would be able to shield his family from the invader who was able to take him away, and that his attempt to trap half the Rwby within his own kid would at least be successful. Desperation weighed heavily on him. While his family is back at home, where he is unsure if they are still safe, he is in an unknown location. Even if Madara has been eliminated, the possibility of hostile shinobi exploiting Hyde Ninja Village at its most vulnerable remains. Then he believed he saw the face of Obito-kun behind Madara's mask, except he was older and had swirling scars on the right side of his face. He had no idea what that meant, but he assumed it was his subconscious telling him that he had failed another loved one. That, similar to the Rwby, he could have avoided such a tragedy if he had been quicker. He sobbed. For the first time in a long time, he shed tears of sorrow. His thoughts returned to the faces of his loved ones. His wise grandfather was Sarutobi-sama. His father figure, albeit slightly perverted, was Jiraiya-sensei. His mother figure was Tsunade-sama. His creepy uncle, Orochimaru-sama, seemed to show no concern. Rin was the team's life. Sixth headmaster Kun was the straight man and his most promising student. Obito-kun was the charming, awkward goofball who always tried to live up to the hype that goes along with his name, and Naruto's mom is the light of his life. The man needed a few minutes at most to get his bearings and clear his head. He dabbed at the tears. He started to think, his eyes red from all the tears. The only thing that gave him hope in this extremely trying situation was the prospect that his wife and son were still alive. Indeed, That's what he ought to think. That's what he ought to keep. That if he manages to get back home, he would still be able to see his family. Despite his teary eyes, he got to his feet with new resolve. He scanned his surroundings for any indications of his location in the elemental nations, but he only saw forests. The trees here are pitifully small in comparison to those in his native country, which is the only indication that he was a long way away. Then he turned to see his orange fox new tenant. For some reason, the Rwby appeared to have been winded and was now fast slumber. He left it alone because he didn't want to take any chances. First, he needed to decide what he was supposed to do. He made plans for how his journey would begin. After placing his right finger on the ground, he sent his chakra through the dirt, noticing that it felt different from any of the locations he had seen in the elemental nations. And he had traveled far and wide. That occurs when a person has enough chakra and is quick enough to cross nations in a matter of seconds. Nevertheless, he took note of the altered sensation and proceeded to stretch his chakra for perception. He ran into an issue. He senses an impending event. That is nothing new. His adversaries might have discovered him and sought to keep him down. The fact that such creatures are empty was the sole issue. As if they were shifting holes in a cloth. The thought of what was in store for him made him uneasy. He tightened his muscles, prepared to fight or run at the first sign of danger, and drew out his reliable tri-pronged kunai, throwing them all over the clearing. However, any bijou would be eliminated because the enemy was slow. Chunin? No, there is no simple explanation for the sense of emptiness. Are the jonin waiting? Maybe. However, there are a lot of them. Fodder? Or maybe to ensure that he loses in an attrition-based battle? Cage buncheons, perhaps? At last there arrived. On the clearing where the huge yellow flash was lodging, a swarm of black creatures like animals with white spiky boneplate armor surged out. He struck at a black dog with his kunai after avoiding its swipe. He was surprised when it rebounded off the neck covered in black fur. They appeared to be more resilient than simple creatures. He applied chakra to his kunai and made another attempt. He jumped up and away from another black dog's leap, stabbed it at the back of its neck, and killed it almost instantly, observing that the beast soon transformed to black smoke. Another one appears, this time attempting to bite him with its mouth. Before teleporting to a kunai hurled high on one of the trees, he cut its neck and kicked it back in the direction of the others. Using his left hand to build his own masterpiece. He calls for Rasengan, a spiraling ball of chakra, which he drops toward the others, hitting the poor black bear in armor first. As he flashed towards another kunai a few tens of meters away, he lost control of the Rasengan, and the ball exploded outward, uprooting trees, crushing rock and gravel, and killing scores of black beasts. With his far greater speed, he sped toward the others, slashing limbs, necks, jugulars, and other parts as he went, occasionally using Rasengan to swat a bear or a black ball with spikes rolling in his direction. Even though there were several of these malevolent monsters, they were easily dispatched by his exceptional speed and ability. While waiting for the following wave, he touched the ground once again and flared his chakra when he noticed something. Individuals? Just one individual. These vicious creatures appeared to be all around him. He pondered absently what sort of spirit art was capable of producing these creatures. He then considered approaching the people to find out if they needed assistance, or if they were the source of the black beasts. He must avoid taking any chances for fear of allowing these abominations to kill another guy. He completed the dangerous plan in his mind by flashing towards his dispersed kunai to gather them, then utilizing Shunshin to rush quickly in the direction of his targets. New World is legendary. About a kilometer distant from the previous Kage, a tall, slender, fair-skinned faunus man with red hair and black bell-shaped ears on the side of his head was sprinting as fast as he could. His white undershirt was drenched in sweat from fear and worry, and his sand-colored buttoned shirt fluttered behind him. He sprinted for his life through a forest, his gray jeans all roughed up from navigating obstacles. Indeed, The man Tyrion Dimma is not content. Not at all, at least not right now. It was meant to be simple. To get some food to eat, he temporarily abandoned his rowdy friend. Although there were Grimm in the area, he was sure of his abilities, weapon, and aura, which allowed him to take down 2 or 3 Beowulfs at once, 5 if he was lucky, as long as there were no alphas. He wasn't prepared for the hundreds of Grimm to suddenly charge at him. The Grimm were still stampeding behind him, and even though he had only been running for a little over 3 minutes, it felt like hours to him. On all sides of him, some are even joining in from behind the tree leans. It looks like he won't make it. They are too many and unrelenting. He's growing too exhausted. His spear was likely thrown away a while ago, and his legs are giving out. He fell because he failed to notice a sharp drop in the terrain since his mind was clouded by the stress and panic. After a few seconds of rolling down, he struck a big boulder on his back. He thought, this is it. In the hopes of a swift and painless death, he closed his eyes. Even though he knew it was a pointless gesture, he hoped his friend would somehow hear his apologies. He squeezed his eyes shut. A second went by. Nothing. 2 seconds went by. He may have been playing with his fatigued thoughts since he heard many thuds in a very short period of time. 3, 4, 5 seconds. At last, there was no more sound of objects striking the ground. His eyes were wide open when he opened them. Standing there was a blond, blue-eyed individual wearing what appeared to be a blue military-grade uniform with a green flak jacket and a white knee-length overcoat on top. His position, immobile but perceptive. A tiny knife with 3 bladed tips was in his hand. As though to reassure him that he should not fear, his savior had his back to him. As they reverted to nothingness, they could see grim smoke everywhere. Tyrion, or Timon as he prefers to be called, was struck speechless. He was saved by this stranger, who was also a human, and in a matter of seconds, he destroyed hundreds of different Grimm. He didn't even appear exhausted. With the hope that the immediate threat had passed, he got up and approached his savior, although he was a little cautious because he was a human. "Hey man. Thanks for the save. I thought I was a goner there," he said to the man. The man's expression was bewildered as he gazed at him. Once more, Timon spoke. "Hey, you okay?" "Oh, I'm Tyrion Dimma by the way, but you can call me Timon." The man cast his gaze downward. He seemed to ponder, then glanced up once more. He spoke with an uneasy smile, saying, "Ano, wari di sakido, wakarimasan deshida." Well, shit. He is not even understood by his savior. How on earth is that possible? He is fairly certain that there is just one language spoken by all 4 kingdoms. It appears that there are others. Does he come from a remote village? How remote is that village that they don't speak the same language? However, how primitive would a village be to have a huntsman with this level of strength, dressed in full combat gear? It is completely nonsensical. He guessed. Let's start with a name for starters. As he uttered his name, he began making gestures with both hands. He pointed at the blond man and said, "Me Timon. T Moon. You." The fact that I'm attempting to talk at all seems to please the man. He began gesturing to himself, and the man imitated him. "Or Nurda father. Me na to." Timon remarked. "That's a start, I guess." The man, who was now known as Nurda father, only grinned and cocked his head to the left. He motioned for this Nurda father to proceed in a certain direction. "Let's go home, me na to." Although his father still didn't comprehend him, he must have been able to infer what he meant since he nodded before turning to face the path he indicated. New World is legendary. It was a quite uneventful, albeit somewhat boisterous, stroll to wherever the animal guy named Timon was to go. Since he knew nothing of the language they were using, Nurda's father appreciated the man's attempt to lighten the situation, but he wished he could comprehend what he was saying. That tiny fact didn't seem to stop him from talking endlessly and occasionally moving exaggeratedly, which is almost always the case. Though they were rare in comparison to the enormous horde just an hour before, there were occasionally black monsters. He handled all of this while the animal person became quiet and switched from talking to watching. Regardless, at least initially. He doesn't even bother to pause his attempted conversation when there are a couple tens of these monsters. The half-animal halted moving and gestured toward a distant location that was plainly visible to Naruto's father's sharp eyes. Timon grinned broadly and started talking some more before dragging him farther in the direction of the small settlement he was pointing to. When they arrived to what appeared to be their destination, Naruto's father was shocked by what he saw. There are more of these animal people who resemble the one next to him, but they have distinct animal traits. There were children running around with what appeared to be rabbit ears, some women walking around with foxtails, and guys with bullhorns. He noticed he was staring at another woman's, but when one of the aforementioned women gave him a furious glare, interrupting his observations. If Naruto's mother had been around, she would have struck him with a frying pan that was boosted by chakra. He looked away, wondering if Orochimaru-sama had gone too far in his trials to create his own town of human animals. It doesn't help that Timon was staring at him smugly. Timon was chatting with some of these animal people who didn't leave them a wide margin to walk at while they were still moving around. It was probably more small talk because the man can talk like that. A very healthy man was hanging some clothing that appeared to have just been washed at a modest, slightly dilapidated house on the outskirts of the settlement. The man was as large as some of the largest members of the Akimichi clan, therefore he meant extremely healthy. He was a dark man with a pig's nose, a short pigtail at the end of his slicked back black hair, and an astonishing mustache that seemed to hang horizontally all the way to his ears. A black sleeveless vest was worn over a dark red, almost maroon, sleeveless collared shirt. He was dressed in black shoes that appeared to have seen better days and navy blue slacks with a mace dangling at the side from his belt. After glancing at the newly arrived pair, the chubby middle-aged man went straight to Timon, sat next to his father, and struck up a conversation. Every now and again, the two looked at the shinobi before carrying on with their discussion. After a short while, Timon arrived to call his name and make a gesture, probably to introduce him to his sturdy friend. The muscular man then gave Naruto's father his guesses for his name in return. Me, Nyamba. Just Nyamba. They carried on with their conversation as Naruto's father looked around him absently once more, seeing the suspicious looks he had been receiving ever since he had arrived in the area. He reasoned that either his appearance was different, that they recognized him as the Yellow Flash, even though Timon didn't, or that he was simply sweating and their probably animalistic noses mistook him for the character. The twiggy Timon and the portly Nyamba turned to him and grinned, seemingly reaching a decision about something. New World is legendary. As far as the former Kage was concerned, dinner was a silent affair, that is, if he ignored Timon. When he gazed up at the sky that night, trying to use the stars to determine his location, he was certain that he was in a different world. The first thing that annoyed him was that the moon was broken. Either the legendary Rwby had escaped, or he was actually in an other realm. He was genuinely a world away from his loved ones, and the fact that they were all still not dust in a blazing crater gave him hope that it wasn't, but it also made him depressed that it wasn't. He needed to come up with a quick means to go back. Maybe if he changed the Harem to be able to transverse dimensions, but he probably can't. He didn't use his own chakra. Not by themselves. When the space-time spirit art struck the one-man army, his thoughts went back to whatever it was that was tearing him apart. Although it kept him intact, he couldn't have done it on his own, not even subliminally, because it was beyond his chakra's capacity to keep him together. Then it dawned on him. The Rwby. For the beast to remain alive, his vessel had to be alive. That implied that the beast in question prevented him from being completely destroyed. He needed to figure out how to get it to follow him, or at least collaborate, but that will be easy given that it represents hatred. That is, a lava-based spark that nullifies chakras. It might not be impossible, at least for him, as Jiraiya-sensei did claim that he was the child of Prophesy or something similar. In any case, it was best to leave the Rwby sleep for the time being, as it was still deeply asleep, so as not to aggravate it further than he probably had already. That being said, he at last became aware of the dynamic pair standing behind him, their faces filled with concern. He was apparently too preoccupied to realize that they were phoning. They gave him a little sleeping area on their old sofa, replete with a pillow and a frayed old blanket, after making several needless checks, such as taking his temperature, determining that he had no injuries, and determining that his mind was damaged based on their gestures. At least they were kind enough to provide him with a place to sleep. When his two new pals departed to their respective rooms, or, if the little hut allowed it, Naruto's father laid his tense body down on the sofa. His thoughts strayed once more, first to his loved ones and then to his future ambitions. He went to sleep with the hope that he would be able to come up with a plan for the morning. New World is legendary. It's still too early, because he woke up just before the sun rose over the trees. For the time being, he left his shinobi vest and his white haori that needed to be washed because they might be the cause of the animal people's apprehension. As usual, he walked outside to meditate and perform some morning workout. After an hour, he returned to find his landlords cleaning the house, Nyamba was cooking, and Timon was obviously preparing his belongings for departure. The gangly one made the decision to leave after a full meal that they could afford. In order to protect the man and to get a better look at the country, Naruto's father made the decision to accompany him. The tiny man accepted the company even if he didn't understand what he was saying. They reached a much larger village of ordinary people after 3 hours of walking. Naruto's father couldn't help but reflect on how different this was from Timon's as they strolled. The latter had more wooden homes and dirt roads, whereas the former had paved roads, concrete structures, and people who appeared to be middle class. It is best to say as little as possible about its residents. They made a halt at what appeared to be a bookshop. As he entered, Timon motioned for Naruto's father to remain outside. The bookkeeper's irate expression gave the shinobi the impression that his human-animal hybrid friend was haggling and failing miserably. When the building's owner drew his handgun, Naruto's father saw enough and deflected the bullet before the other two realized what had happened. The man was so angry that he yelled at them and gestured toward the exit. And they did. Timon was sitting on the pavement with his father, Naruto, looking sorrowful, and the latter was a little angry that a man would try to shoot him out of the blue. Then a blond man with a well-hidden weapon behind him came at them. Naruto's father would have missed it if he wasn't a ninja. The tall, slightly stubbled man wore a variety of brown outfits, including a red bandana on his left, brown pants, black shoes, a leather vambrace with a fingerless glove on the same side, a tan dress shirt with a dark brown sleeveless vest on top, and a spalder on his right shoulder. Naruto's father reasoned that he was probably the shinobi equivalent of this land. After a lengthy conversation, Timon indicated to Naruto's father that Taiyon was his name, and that he was a huntsman, a term that the Nin are unable to define. Despite being smaller than her father, the infant girl on the man's arm had hair that was the same shade of gold. Then a family man. He wishes he was like way with his beloved Naruto too. After entering the building and appearing to lecture the shopkeeper, the man named Taiyon called Timon and Naruto's father inside. The blonde huntsman's influence probably caused the man behind the counter to reluctantly give the two a discount. The father of Naruto took another look at the infant and grinned before they went. The infant then turned to face him with a smile. In a language that the others could not comprehend but could infer, he thanked the man who had assisted them. When Timon got home, he saw Nyamba in the back. Nyamba was sweating and carrying a boar, suggesting that he had just returned from hunting for sustenance. The two then grinned at him as Timon said, "I think we have all we need to teach him to father here some common language," in words that the parent hasn't yet understood. In the center of a grassy plain, a blond man wearing blue jeans and a sweatshirt sat cross-legged on the ground. His face was calm, the trees were peaceful, and his eyes were closed. A few tens of meters from the village's outside wall, Rwby's father was meditating when he thought back on the previous several months. He was no closer to returning home than he is to telling a girl he's sorry. In contrast to popular belief, he was so awkward when he attempted to ask Rwby's mother out that she became impatient and asked him instead. Returning to his earlier ideas, he recalled how challenging it was for Timon and Nyamba to teach him their language. Although he was regarded as a genius at almost anything shinobi-related, he is unsure if this was due to his own incapacity or if his own tutors were simply ineffective educators. Then, it was his teachers. Timon is a talkative person. Had it not been for his tendency to use strange language that Rwby's father finds difficult to understand, he might have made an excellent instructor. He prayed that nobody else would say such, at least not in a typical way, lest he misinterpret them. Young in their child, you nearly got it down, what does that even mean? In addition, he wants to clarify. I shni what you did there. Even while others are hesitant to mention that. However, it is quite humiliating when they go about buying supplies and people are staring at them with smiles on their cheeks because Nyamba seems to be babying him with very brief statements and accompanying motions. It became so bad that other faunus people from the village began teaching him, as Rwby's father now knows their name. The children who relentlessly pushed objects in his face while yelling their names were most likely the most potential teachers. Since he was essentially their best protection despite not having a hunter's license, any kind of identification, or any kind of education, it was easy to gain their trust. He still blurts out things in his original tongue at random, but he was able to piece it together enough to understand and relate to others. Nevertheless, he managed well enough and grew closer to the hamlet as a result. In return for some clothes and food, he was even assigned to guard the small village. He also had to give thanks to Taeyang, the huntsman from Signal, who shares his tiny bundle of joy, Yang, and occasionally assists him in his education by giving him some reading material. Something that the Rwby father values greatly since it makes him think of his own child, whom he hopes is doing well with the Rwby mother. That man was a terrific one. Because he talks about girls so much, he is quite talkative, and makes him think about Inoichi. If it weren't for his and his team's work forcing them to travel to a location named Vale for missions, Taeyang would have been the huntsman protecting the small island. Although Rwby's father like this, whenever Taeyang and his wife, whom Rwby's father hasn't seen yet, gather with their teammates to depart on a mission, it means that Timon, Nyamba, and Rwby's father are responsible for looking after their little underscore 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 underscore. The Flying Thunder God is legendary. In order to find his friend and the village's unofficial guardian, Timon left Nyamba in charge of the house once more. He was considering having him take an official hunter's exam so he could also collect some money. It's not that he doesn't enjoy the man's company. In fact, his incapacity to comprehend puns is amusing in and of itself, and he's a wonderful friend, but times are difficult, particularly for the faunus. Given his abilities, he should be receiving a respectable income right away. He continued to walk in his usual attire, which was the same one he had on when he was a hem discovered by Rwby's father. He was only wearing it patched up and appeared to be in worse shape. They were previously squeezed for a lean, so it's not like they have any money for nicer clothes. He looked everywhere for his cunning acquaintance, a shinobi he calls himself, who specialized in this kind of work. The fact that Rwby's father is the kind of guy who would rather listen than speak isn't helping either, because his faunus ears are only useful for monitoring potential grim attacks. He felt something as he made his way randomly through the dense forest toward a clearing at the end. He hurried in the direction of the clearing where he felt it, defying his common sense and sense of security, and what he saw made every hair on his body stand on end. Naruto's father sat there cross-legged and focused, dressed in his usual all-blue outfit. This is distinct from Timon's usual perception of the man, who occasionally puts himself into a trance. For Aum's sake, he was boiling up and flaming red. Was this his aura? Perhaps he looked like him? He had the impression that he would rather leap in the middle of a clearing full of Grimm than continue to stand here. He spun around and started running as quickly as he could, but Naruto's father's location appeared to burst into a crimson storm before it subsided before he could gain a good space between them. He ran back again, against his better judgment. The clearing was vanished. All that remained was a large crater with a blonde knife wielder standing still, face down on the earth. Timon rushed down and embraced Naruto's father, looking for signs of life. He was relieved to find him unharmed, with skin that was immaculate but garments torn as if he had been fighting for his life against hundreds of black creatures. He pondered absently what had happened to Naruto for him to blow up like that on his own. Regardless, he transported Naruto's father back to the village to be examined while considering any possible Grimm-related justification. The Flying Thunder God is legendary. When Naruto's father was standing in the center of a broad clearing in front of a sizable cave carved into the side of a rock, he could see a huge gate leading to his prisoner, the Rwby. In order to model the various ways this interaction could unfold, Naruto's father approached it with bated breath. He would rather not be forced into a fight of wills against it, albeit there are many of possible outcomes. The beast spoke his name in a deep voice while staring at him murderously. "Humayan! What the hell are you doing here? Are you here to gloat at catching the strongest of the 9 bijou?" The Naruto father paused to see the thoughtful expressions the beast was giving him before responding. "No, Rwby, I came to ask if you know of a way to return. Even while it appears that they are not the mindless beasts that were portrayed, it is still wise to exercise caution when handling them. As you may or may not know, we are not in our own world right now. We are in a world called Remnant, and in an island on the outskirts of a place called Vale. We likely have been transported here by Madara back when we were locked in a battle." Before going into a rage over the memories of Madara and the impostor, the beast appeared to recall what had transpired. "That was not Madara! But I will rip him to shreds as well if I can get my claws on him." Naruto's father has something to think about after learning the truth. Instead of Madara, he encountered a man who shared his affinity for Gen's spirit art. The Uchiha are indeed formidable, but he is wise enough to avoid judging a whole clan based on the deeds of a select few. He still has every reason to return as quickly as possible, even if it means facing the beast once more, if there is someone as dangerous as a mythical creature like Madara. But first things first. In the hopes that the beast would respond, he inquired, "Do you know of the identity of this fake Madara then, Rwby?" His father interrupted him to give him time to consider his next course of action. "I have no interest in the names of petty humans like your kin does mine, you little." The disguised man was either hiding information or the Rwby didn't really know who he was. Whatever the case, Naruto's father only learned that the bijou is fully sentient. "Maybe I can take advantage of that?" The father of Naruto took a chance when he said, "Would you like to work in a partnership then, Rwby? At least until we can get back home." The former Kage stepped aside when he realized. "Why should I trust humans who bother my kin then proceed to lock us away when we strike back?" Therefore, they were not destructive monsters at all. "Admittedly, I knew not of your history and only heard of your side of the story now. What can I do to gain your trust then?" "Ha! Gain my trust? You must have left your brain on the other side, you imbecile. Why should I trust you at all?" Naruto's father gave his query a lot of thought before responding. He spoke after a few minutes during which the enormous beast's laughter filled the wide area. "To see your kin again, the other bijou, your other half, whatever it may have been you held of importance on the other side. You have as much to gain from this as I do." The Rwby's laughter ceased. It pondered what to say next before saying, "You seem different from the rest of you lot, but it may just be because you're desperate. Very well, human. The best I can give you at the moment is a chance to gain my acknowledgement. If you wish, you can fight me and see how you fare. I will give my decision then. Naruto's father considered what the Rwby had said. Would the danger be worthwhile? In addition to putting the people of this new world in jeopardy of being destroyed by the bijou, he might very well die while apart from his loved ones and everything he valued. However, he might also acquire a strong ally who could be the difference between returning home and dying here, and who might play a significant role in the masked man's demise. He then raises his shirt with one arm as the fingers of the other arm glow blue. Very well, Rwby. I wish to test my might against you then. Everyone on the open field could see the seal on his stomach. He opened that which restrained the beast, having thought to include fail-safe seals. The Flying Thunder God is legendary. Rwby. He was prepared, but the Rwby practically flew out of the cavern and headed for Naruto's father. He hurled kunai everywhere with a simple flick of his wrist before teleporting away to avoid being crushed by enormous clawed hands. In order to confuse the beast, he then kept flashing around, teleporting to kunai and only being there for a brief moment to enter its peripheral view before teleporting to another. Then, Naruto's father threw a kunai over the beast and, as he teleported to the thrown kunai, willed an upgraded Rasengan to his hand. But a Rasengan! Before exploding in a powerful outpouring of chakra, the Rwby was driven down the earth and hammered in by the large ball of whirling destruction that landed on top of its skull. Then, with 9 tails chasing him from all sides, he nearly got crushed, but he managed to teleport away. The tri-pronged blades, earth, and rock were thrown away as the beast's tails swung in a broad arc on all sides. The surrounding area was then raised into uneven topography as a result of its powerful ground pounding. The tails then pursued Naruto's father again, but this time his eyesight of all the tails was obscured by the shifted boulders surrounding him, which made blindsided attacks easier. However, he ducked under most of the assaults and teleported away from the others with practiced ease, tagging a tail in the process. Naruto's father was forced to retire behind one of his kunai that had been blown back a considerable distance earlier, as the arrogant bijou then flailed around in all directions. Then he teleported off, reforming another Rasengan in his hand. The Rwby jumped backwards to avoid being struck again by any sky-based strikes, and he peered around at the dispersed kunai in the distance. Little did it realize that after teleporting to a tail and charging up the Rasengan to the supersized version once more, this time the size of the beast's head, Naruto's father was sprinting on top of him. When the gigantic fox finally noticed him and turned to face him, he struck it right in the jaw, sending the massive creature flying backwards and knocking it upside down. The Flying Thunder God is legendary. The Rwby, Kurama, was growing increasingly irritated. He was enraged now, not that he wasn't before the altercation began. He was aware of the man's speed, but it was one thing to know and quite another to feel it again, this time in actual combat. This time, at least, his opponent wasn't being dropped on from above by the enormous frog. He fought hard, though. Without speed, he had every edge in this battle. The man misjudged the strength of the pitiful balls Naruto's father hurled at the beast. After knocking off a bijou's bread and butter, Kurama turned his enormous body to land on his feet and swung a real bijudama at the man who was still on the verge of collapsing. He didn't charge it for too long, since if he did, the man would simply leave. To his amazement, the man did not dodge at all when he launched his strike. His better vision revealed that the man was holding a kunai in front of the beast while holding his hands in front of his face, palms facing the beast and arms straight. Then, with the force of a super-compressed ball of chakra, it struck him. Well, foo dash! At Kurama's back, the bijudama detonated, throwing him forward once more and confusing him this time. Oh no, that man! Space-time spirit art, damn it! He stayed here because of that Fuin spirit art, damn it! Additionally, damn that man twice for deflecting his strike. Kurama lifted his head off the ground and charged another bijudama, but he decided to try something new this time. Just to get even with people and their propensity to name and scream their small spirit arts, he decided to title it Bijou Barrage. He launched an assault that lived up to its moniker, carpet bombing the terrain with tiny Bijudama that were tens of times more numerous, but had only a fraction of the original's power. When the huge QB noticed that Naruto's father was teleporting to avoid it for his own wretched life, he grinned. Eventually, one struck it lucky and went off close to the man. Despite the silence in the field, Kurama knew better. Even though he is free to walk around and isn't out there attacking the small humans, he was still in the seal. He saw the seconds go by. The damned blonde was nowhere to be seen. Head blasted! He felt irritated with himself for not thinking of this earlier, and considered firing again to prevent Naruto's father from getting any more time off. Once more, he charged a Bijou barrage and fired, carpet bombing the area, which now resembled the foot of an avalanche following an earthquake rather than an open field at the base of a cliff. When one of the little Bijudama flew back at him and struck his face, he was taken by surprise. The flying thunder god is legendary. The father of Naruto was breathing heavily. In his opinion, this was not progressing. He was not harming the beast as much as he would have liked. He even had to go to sage mode, but that was just postponing the inevitable because he couldn't fully control it, and would only be able to keep it on for a short while. When he kicked one of those tiny Bijudama back to the beast, though, it made him smile. Not wanting to waste any more time, he rehardened his visage and willed a Rasengan powered by nature to come to life, supersizing once more. He can't keep the temporary power up long enough to rush there and hit the Bijou himself, so perhaps this will be the last time. After charging the Sin Spirit Art Amped Udama Rasengan, Naruto's father transported it to the tail of the beast. Senpo, Cho Udama Rasengan! He stared at the scene before him, unable to even smirk because the loss of Sage Mode depleted him too rapidly for his taste. When the fox sensed a strong onslaught behind it, its eyes enlarged and exploded. Nevertheless, he was aware that it was insufficient to defeat the intelligent creature, so he readied his subsequent assault. He once again entered Sage Mode, used one hand to construct a cage bunshin, gripped 3 kunai in each hand on the clone and himself, and sprinted for the overgrown rabbit dog that was rising. The next attack was an experimental spirit art that he had not yet tested in live combat. It is also one of the very few attacks that he can claim to have named because Jiraiya-sama and Naruto were constantly criticizing his bad naming, though he didn't believe them. Rasen Senkucho Rinbyaku Sanshiki. The raised fox became perplexed as he and his clone threw the kunai in a circle around it, and then Naruto's father vanished. The flying thunder god is legendary. Kurama just woke up after being dropped on his back by the 3-time damned teleporter. The fact that Naruto's father could launch his strikes without him using it annoyed him. He stood up, still in a fog, and was about to unleash another Bijudama when he saw 12 kunai arranged in a circle, with himself in the center. He knew this action would be painful as he turned to face 2 Naruto fathers. The father of Naruto vanished. Kurama didn't even have time to be horrified because the attack came so quickly. He couldn't even see where the man was or where he was hitting next thanks to the Kage's rapid sequence of Bijudama knockoffs. Although he was shot on his right flank, he looked left despite the pain. He glanced to the right and was struck from above. When he looked up, a huge ball of chakra was used to uppercut him. He looked down to see the beast's face and the rest of his body on the ground, and he was hit by a number of balls that he couldn't even count. After that, Kurama started flailing frantically, with limbs flying everywhere, tails swinging in all directions, and mouths open as he fired tiny blasts of Bijudama. Those stupid balls are coming this time from all directions almost at once. Damn those quadrice, or whatever it is after 3, the arrogant Bijou was struck by 12 lightning-fast, extremely powerful blows from all sides almost simultaneously, burying him in debris and gigantic, whirling, chakra-enhanced doomed balls. The assault left him severely confused. He wasn't prepared for something that powerful from a Kage whose skill set consists solely of swiftness and feeble assaults. It was a damage accumulating combo rather than a single strong attack. Though he wouldn't say anything about it, he now reluctantly respects the man's authority. Then, using his opponent, who was now gasping for air and essentially immobilized, the Rwby rose once more. Though too confused to do much, he eventually got his clawed hands on the man in the hopes of crushing him and leaving this mindscape. With a frenzied smile on the Biju's face, he squeezed on the man. He will now be able to enjoy the freedom he has long been denied. In an attempt to escape out of his small nature mood, the blonde Kage was shouting. Kurama increased his pressure, determined not to let victory slip away so lightly. Kurama thought, this human should now be on the verge of passing. Once more, he failed to see the brilliance of the man who had put him in jail the day he was freed. The man's failsafe was designed to lock him up again because he touched the blonde, or at least that's what Kurama thought happened as he was pulled back into the gate at the base of the cliffside by Nudamam's chains. He noticed Nudamam's figure from the side of the gate, smiling sadly before turning to confront her mate's damaged body, just before he was totally drawn into the cavern. The most powerful Biju turned to face his opponent, who gave him a stern glare. His eyes were contemplative, devoid of emotion. The father of Naruto talked. He paused to regain his breath before continuing, saying, Rwby, the result is clear had our battle continued. I wish to train some more before I intend to face you again. The next time we fight, I'll get your cooperation in finding a way back. Whether you like it or not. The man then cracked a grin. The statement that surprised the fox the most was, then we can get back home to our loved ones. You and me both. Get out of here and come back when you are worth a damn human. Next time, I'll kill you and then I'll kill the masked human. The man then grinned as he turned to face his friend, who was approaching him. Sorry, Nudamam. Your failsafe was used up far earlier than I expected it to be. I tried hard to avoid a battle of attrition, but all it did was drain my reserves faster. At least I saw your face again. Don't worry, I'll be back soon, then we'll be a happy family with Naruto again. Then, with the exception of the cavern at the cliff's edge, the man vanished from the now ruined mindscape. Then Kurama grinned. Perhaps those people do have some redeeming qualities. No, he won't be embracing the blonde man just yet. He will be quite difficult for his human carrier. However, it will be enjoyable for him to do so. The Rwby recalled his own father and his family as he heard the words his opponent said to the image of his old container. The Flying Thunder God is legendary. Timon was rushing as quickly as he could back to the settlement, trying not to show his feelings in case he attracted the Grim. Hopefully, there is a hunter nearby who can heal his friend of his explosive diarrhea or something, and explain to him what the devil just happened to him. He is carrying the sack of potatoes over his shoulder. When a figure emerged from behind the trees, he came to a stop. It was a woman with a hood of the same hue over her head and a white cloak over her shoulders. Her hair was black with red highlights, and she was dressed in black. She glanced at him, then at his passenger, and finally appeared to be thinking. She said, Are you kidnapping him? This completely irritated Timon, so he responded, No, I'm not. I am saving him from himself after he spontaneously combusted a few minutes ago. Where did you even get the idea that I am kidnapping him? Then it dawned on him what the girl thought. Oh. Fortunately, as she spoke, she appeared to comprehend him. Well, I'm Summer and I'm a huntress. I can help somehow. Timon, who didn't seem to know how to treat a man who appeared to be hurt, gave her a deadpan response when he said, I guess they should call you Bummer because you don't seem to be of help at all. She responded with a very irritated expression. Hey! Bummer sounds like a sad name. I prefer my name right now. No, that's not the point. Let me help. I can escort you or something. My teammates can help, probably. Maybe Raven. Yeah, that's right. Raven! Let's get him to Raven! Let's go! Everyone's attention was drawn to a 5-year-old child rushing through the market district, his blonde, spiky hair blowing in the wind, wearing an orange jacket that appeared a touch too heavy for the temperature. It was still a little before sunset, and the lessons had just ended. Despite his exuberant greetings, which resembled those of a child in sugar rush, the locals returned the greetings, but with less vigor. When the child finally arrived at the modest store on the outskirts of the shopping center, he went inside and enjoyed the sight he had been missing every day since enrolling at the Ninja Academy a few weeks prior. A bench by the counter for the elderly or just for small talk between the seller and the customer, the cashier's smile completes the simple yet laid-back atmosphere, and the store was small but crammed with merchandise to sell on shelves left and right. The clean, wooden interior gives a cozy feel that many customers prefer over the busy supermarkets. The child welcomed his mother behind the desk with a smile and a shake of his head. The child looked at his mother, who was sitting in her wheelchair as usual, and said, "I'm home, Mom. Did you have a hard time while I was away?" As she was replenishing some of her store's inventory, his mother responded, "I'm good, Nara-chan. It was a little busy today, but I managed. A lot of people asked what time you will be home though. They kind of miss you since you're not here all day like before. How's school today?" She picked up a can from the stack on top of her legs and placed it on the shelf in front of her, her bright red hair cascading behind her. She is dressed in a simple green apron over a brown skirt that falls halfway down her leg and a white shirt. As he assisted his mother in placing the cans on their shelves, Nerda responded, "I'm here after school and on the weekends so they won't be missing me that much. School's great. My classmates are all fun, like that dog guy or the bug guy or the fat guy or the lazy guy and the bushy brows guy, oh and Sakura-chan. They're really nice and they laugh a lot." Nerda's mother smirks at her son's flushed cheeks and says, "I'm glad, Nara-chan, but make sure to remember all their names next time, not just a girl who happens to catch your eye. By the way, my friend Mikoto, do you remember her? Maybe not. You met her once, but maybe you were too young to actually remember. We rarely meet nowadays, unlike 5 years ago, but we had some small talk the other day. She said her son is also a student at the academy, and that his name was Nerda Friend-kun, I believe. Anyway, try to befriend him as well, okay?" she asked after handing over her wheelchair to her son. "Okay, Mom. I hope he's as cool as the other guys, but not cool like that damned handsome in class with the black hair, eyes and blue shirt. That guy kinda rubs me the wrong way. I mean, girls were crying his name left and right, but he's ignoring everyone. I think he's gay," Nerda said when he was done working also. Then he looked at his mom. "What do you think, Mom?" The way her son described this stranger made Nerda mom shiver, but then she recalled how her friend Mikoto from the Uchiha clan had described her own son. He has black eyes and black hair, and he wears blue casuals to match his older brother. He prefers to be quiet since he wants to catch up to his Itachi, who graduated early, and he would rather study. In this way, he idolizes his brother. Nerda mom spoke with an uneasy voice. "Nara-chan, I think that was Nerda Friend-kun. Please be nice to him and try to make friends with him. I think he's rather too idolizing of his big brother and needs more of his own age to interact with." Sweat fell from Nerda's brow as he considered this new information. He shook his head, turned back to face his mother, and replied, "Okay, Mom. I'll try to make friends with him. I'll try to make him straight as well. It'll be my first mission. Databeo. I have to be friends with a gay guy." The mother and boy turned when they heard a knock on the storefront. A young man with gray hair and a heavy-lidded countenance caught their attention as they turned to face the source. Only one eye was visible since his face was 3/4 covered. He was dressed in a tight-fitting, blue sleeveless shirt that seemed to go with his face mask, blue slacks that resembled typical shinobi attire, and arm sleeves that matched his outfit. His words were, "Yo, Kushine Nerda." As her husband grinds himself to the bone in training and missions under the ANBU, the sight of her old student on one of his rare days off made Nerdumam smile. A few weeks after the Rwby attack and her husband's disappearance, she reflected absently on the time she informed 6th Headmaster about his friend Obito's role in the incident. To put it mildly, he didn't take it well, so he made a self-promise to strengthen himself so that he could defend his sensei's family and his remaining closest loved ones. Her son's casual conversation, which was so energetic and joyful that it could only be described as Naruchan being Naruchan, jolted her out of her thoughts. She turned to face the 6th Headmaster, who was listening to her son's incessant chatter while making his trademark eye smile, which she still finds incomprehensible. The man glanced at her, then at her inventory of both perishable and non-perishable items. Naturally, she said, his first step is to look at the books on the side that Jiraiya-sama, the sensei of Nuda's father, virtually pleaded with her to buy for him. Even as a child, it was his favorite activity. She will never understand the pleasure Dad took in reading those books aloud. She offered it to the headmaster of the 6th with a slight sigh. After listening for her son to ascend to the 2nd story of their small business and house, she turned to face the young man and said, Naruchan, you can change into something more indoor now. 6th Headmaster and I will be talking while we wait for you. Anything else you wish to buy? She said. The 6th Headmaster glanced in the direction of the stairs where Naruto vanished, waited until he was certain the boy wouldn't hear, and then turned to look about. Satisfied that nobody would hear, he responded. There's been some rumors circulating about the Uchiha planning a rebellion among the council. Apparently, due to the masked man's ability to control the Rwby, the higher-ups are now skeptical of the Uchiha whose Sharingan allows for such feats. The Uchiha are getting annoyed of them being seen as suspects, but as of the moment, their plans are unknown to me. The Sandaime is hard-pressed at keeping peace between Hyde Ninja Village and the founding clan. Oh, and some eggplants and miso like always if you will kushine. As she reflected on his disclosure, her husband's thoughts surfaced. Father, what would you do? Continue your observation for now, 6th Headmaster Quinn. We may not be able to do much, but every little thing counts for the safety of the village. Hopefully, nothing bad would come to pass. She responded to the silver-haired Anbu after a brief period of realism. Naruto returned sporting white shorts with a blue stripe on one side and a black top with a red spiral in the center. He immediately targeted the 2 adults behind the counter. Naruto looked at the young man, who could only offer a sweat drop and an awkward eye smile that Naruto could never understand how he could make to convey so much emotion, and half stated, half complained. So, did 6th Headmaster and I order anything yet? He always takes so long to choose what he wants. After that, he looked expectantly at his mother to see whether he had any job to do. She grinned and gave him the order from the 6th Headmaster. He got the order, packed it, handed it to the older boy, and grinned at his mother after coming up with a fantastic idea. Hey Kaa-chan, let's have 6th Headmaster and I for dinner. He's rarely here anyway, always going out on missions and stuff. When he returns or has some free time, he's usually walking somewhere he calls Road of Life, wherever that is. Naruto was pleased with her son's thoughtfulness. You're right, Naruchan. 6th Headmaster Kun owes us a lot of time to catch up on. You are staying right, 6th Headmaster Kun? When the man saw the happy expressions of the mother and kid, he forgot whatever response he had come up with to reject the offer. He shrugged and accepted the offer, thinking, it's just not fair how these two smile. Sunspot is legendary. As he walked to school on this new school day, Naruto's pal carelessly asked whether he might miss it. He half glanced over his shoulder and thought, the girls are annoying with all their shouting and screeching and stalking. Since they don't push anything, he considered the guys to be at least pleasant. The green monstrosity with the enormous eyebrows was at least eager to learn, the lazy person was at least intelligent, the obese guy was well, fat, the dog boy was fine if stupid, and the glasses guy appeared smart. However, the blonde child was just an odd sight. Although the youngster consistently overcharges his spirit arts well beyond the necessary quantity of chakra and struggles with chakra management, he excels in all other areas. Perhaps the child simply had so much chakra that he could afford to do so, he thought. Not that his Naruto pal was against it, but that would at least explain his persistent hyperactivity. Even though he was an eyesore, he was something he looked forward to every day. The youngster was not only hilariously foolish in his own right, academically or otherwise, but his antics were so eye-catching that even his fangirls were diverted from their ongoing whatever they were doing. The boy's understanding of things that Naruto's friend isn't even aware of, such as this fluent spirit art, which he continued attempting to convey to everyone without success, doesn't hurt. Not that he was listening in or anything, but he was close enough to hear the Uzumaki and the other guys have that one talk, he recalled. Yes, fluent spirit art is truly amazing. It's like having a huge animal in your gut, Naruto shouted with pride. Choji is capable of doing anything Naruto does, plus he doesn't require spirit art from Fuyin, a hooded child with a dog dozing on top shot back. But I didn't mean that. It would be like a giant dog rabbit or something, Naruto responded. Oh, dog rabbit? I must have some of that. A plump boy with hair split down the middle, both spiking up in opposing directions, said. Perhaps Dad will buy some for dinner. No, Choji, a dog rabbit does not exist. The big boy, now called Choji, was corrected by a boy with long black hair and completely white eyes. It's either a dog or a rabbit only. With a sparkle in his eyes, the hooded child said, Well, there are some bunnies I'd rather be seeing. Stop talking, Kiba! There are moments when I question which of you and Akamaru is the dog. The hooded youngster, now known as Kiba, was yelled at by a blonde woman dressed in purple. In retrospect, he learned nothing from that discussion that would have improved his understanding of the potential of Fuin spirit art. Yes, he was aware of its everyday usage. According to the blonde hurricane of Foolish, he has a lot of those storage scrolls at home because of his great older brother, but they can be utilized for far more important purposes. He might be able to persuade the man to describe the underappreciated area of spirit arts. Too much trouble, no. He would just ask the boy how he found out. After making up his mind, the friend of Naruto waited for the recess bell to sound before approaching Naruto to chat. When he saw that the man was gone, the Naruto friend got up to go to Naruto while the bell was ringing. In an attempt to find the most hyperactive youngster in the community, he glanced backwards, but to no effect. The child in question was squatting on the table in front of him, staring at him closely as though judging him, and he was shocked when he turned away. How did he arrive so quickly? The Uchiha asked himself, but dismissed it as the result of the man's excessive energy. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Naruto's friend was shocked by this charge. Hey, are you gay? And failed to notice that his fangirls were raging at the resident clown. It's hip and alta bayo to be homosexual. Simply put, are you? Not that he doesn't understand his point of view, given his disregard for his official fan club with its official pins and all, but this guy's accusation really got under his skin. He was about to respond to the curiosity-driven insult when he saw the blonde in front of him widen his eyes and bring his face closer to his own. Nearer. Nearer. As they get closer, their eyeballs enlarge. Their lips are practically touching as they get closer. Nearer, one can feel the other's breath. The young Uchiha breathed a sigh of relief at almost but thankfully avoiding losing his first kiss to a dumbass blonde when one of the girls pushed him away by performing a dive bomb on him. He looked down to thank the younger Hyuga in class, but stopped himself when he saw her getting up, flushed redder than his clan's famed Sharingan, then running out of the room all teary-eyed. He then looked down on his classmate who was tackled with all the force of a little girl, albeit with superhuman physical capacity. Obviously, it looked more painful than it sounded, but he was still grateful. He then heard someone from in front of his seat and turned to face the boy in question, Naruto Shadow Ninja. I apologize. I must have hit him when I yawned since I was sleepy. But I have a question. If I struck him, how did he fall sideways rather than in your direction? Oh no, my pal blinked. Sunspot is legendary. When Nerda finally woke up on a white bed, he was confused about where he was and remembered the events that had happened before he blacked out. The memory almost made him throw up in his mouth, but he was able to control himself. He looked around and saw that he was in the school clinic, and based on the sky he could see from the window next to his bed, he missed lunch and it was probably time to go home. He was forced to stand and put on his sandals when the doors opened, revealing Kiba, Choji, Shadow Ninja, Ino-chan, Sakura-chan, a cute chick with pure white eyes and a face the color of his mother's hair, and strangely, the person he didn't want to see right now. Look man, I just wanna say I don't swing that way. I think, he said, his mouth exploding like a bolt of lightning as he was just being Nerda. I mean, that was a complete accident. Sure, so you're Nerda. Adjacent to him, the blonde girl in purple elbowed the hooded dog boy. Shadow Ninja apologized, saying, I'm sorry, Nerda. It's a pain to make it longer than it should be. I leaned back and, well, I didn't see you behind me. I apologize. When Nerda blinked and his companion moved away, the adorable white-eyed girl's face got a deeper shade of crimson, and Kiba burst out laughing. Then, everything made sense to the blonde guy, and he also became red. It was you! Instead of exploding in embarrassment and rage, Nerda exhaled in relaxation, much to the group's confusion. Ha! I'm at least aware that I'm not gay now. That's a relief, ah? While the raven-haired Uchiha palmed his face with the intensity of a real man, the others could only perspire at his words. Their conversations went on for a short while, with nothing noteworthy happening except that Ino and Sakura grabbed Nerda's friend left and right, that the little Hinata passed out after Nerda approached her to have a brief conversation like he does with everyone else, and that Kiba was beaten up by the girls after making an inappropriate comment. As a result, the day ended on a positive note. Sunspot is legendary. For one Uchiha Nerda friend, the days went by so quickly as he gazed out the window, clearly bored with the lesson. The classes are too simple for him, and he needs to catch up to his brother in some way. It has been a year and a half since he began attending the Ninja Academy, and they haven't taught him any spirit art that he doesn't already know, which is why his brother graduated so early. In addition, Itachi hardly ever hangs out with him these days because the older Uchiha sibling was accepted into the ANBU, led by the 6th head master of the Sharingan himself. He hates to acknowledge that the man may not be a Uchiha and should not be entitled to their cherished spirit art, but his skills speak for him. Nerda's friend glanced to the side, past the obnoxious Pinkette staring at him, at his classmate from the previous year, this year, and the following years, Uzumaki Nerda. The boy was taking private lessons on Fuin spirit art, something of which he was extremely jealous. He then turned to face the other table, a brown-haired boy with completely white eyes, dressed in a traditional blue kimono. The Hyuga's own genius boy was paying close attention to the teacher, but Nerda friend assumed that the boy must have known everything about what was being taught as well. He looked at everyone else, and they were at least making an effort, but failing to pay attention, with the exception of a few who didn't care at all, such as the Nara boy who almost made him kiss Nerda, the fat kid who is currently eating chips, and Nerda himself, who is too busy writing something. He tried and failed to ask the blonde where he learns Fuin spirit art a few months ago, and he didn't try again for a long time because the awkward atmosphere between them still hung on Kiba like the smell of dogs. It didn't help that his fan club kept trying to keep him away from the Uzumaki, so he stayed low and worked harder on his own training from his father, Fugaku. Now that things are finally normal enough that his fan club isn't trying to filter who he talks to, he decided to try to ask Nerda once more after the dismissal bell rang. When the signal to go home went off, he got up to speak to the blonde. He discovered that the boy was already hurrying home, as he always does, which annoyed his friend because it didn't help him advance in his studies. He ran to catch up to Nerdu, and saw that they were going to the commercial district. Is he going shopping? He asked himself, but he didn't care because he couldn't care less. He saw the boy stop at a small store on the district's edge and followed him inside, and before he could do anything else, Nerdu stopped by the counter and called him. Nerdu! With curious eyes, the sun-kissed blonde turned to face him. Hey pal, how are you? Hold on. Has your harem also arrived here? Nerdu asked, looking around frantically. No, I arrived by myself. I've been wanting to ask you something for a while, said his friend, ignoring the fact that it might have sounded a little awkward. Surely the man in front of him could read his face well enough to avoid giving the incorrect impression, right? No, I'm not and probably never will be gay. That isn't always a bad thing, but nonetheless, apparently not. Avoid that dope. Where are you learning Fuan spirit art, idiot? That's what I was going to ask. In a swift and manly manner, my friend Nerdu responded. Oh. All right, I'm sorry. About that, My mother taught me, but I'm learning it very slowly since she says my handwriting is terrible. Nerdu turned to face the counter and noticed that the woman in question emerged from the rear, perhaps after hearing all the yelling. Oh, you mean Nerdu friend-kun? You didn't inform me that you would be bringing a buddy, Naruto-chan. Dear friend-kun, how are you? How is your mom doing? He was met by a redhead in a wheelchair that his Nerdu friend had never seen before, probably because he doesn't often visit this area of Hyde Ninja Village and wouldn't bother to come to a small shop like this. Oh, my bad, the woman said again, sensing his concern. Since you were a baby the last time I saw you, you must not actually know me. I'm Uzumaki Nudamam, Mikoto's buddy from our academy days, and Naruto-chan's mother. Since he had more pressing issues at the moment, Nerdu's companion could only nod in agreement with that small epiphany and store it in his memory for later. Uzumaki-san, will you also teach me Fuan spirit art? After grinning and nodding, the older woman said, Only if you be good friends with Naruto-chan, sure. Even though the boy was a nuisance, he was a good kind of annoyance, he supposed, and it didn't hurt that he would be a fellow student to share knowledge in Fuan spirit art with if ever. The raven-haired Uchihasai twitched as he looked towards the boy in question, smiling at him and at the situation. Then he said, barely audible, begrudgingly, Okay, Uzumaki-san, I accept. She clapped her hands together and took his hand in hers as he saw her smile brightly at his response. So, it's a deal. I'm a little busy during the week, so let's start on the weekends. At the elderly woman's words, he observed that the store was empty of customers, and he started to perspire. His companion Nerdu was pleased with his interactions for the day and was about to leave for training, but he was stopped. Would you like to purchase something, Nerdu friend-kun? He felt he should have brought his entire allowance today because of the sparkle in her eyes, but at least he receives instruction in Fuan spirit art, which his brother isn't very good at. In the end, he spent more for the day than he had in a week. Sunspot is legendary. A hooded man stood outside Hyde Ninja Village, a few hundred kilometers or so from the village walls, and he seemed to be lost in thought as he stared at a certain unremarkable spot for a long time. The man in the black hood, which only exposed his blue sandals, looked behind him as if he sensed someone or something coming, and someone did. He looked toward the tree-line, where another man, much older, was also wearing a hood to conceal his features. So this is the rift, huh? Said the elderly man. Crimson eyes with 3 tomos gazed at the same location the first hooded man had earlier examined. His crimson armor, tempered by age in combat, clinked with his movements as he went. His spiky white hair, flowing out of the hood, swayed in the breeze. The man with the hood only ever said, Yes. He pulled off his hood to reveal a head of red hair, and as he looked up, the shadows that had veiled his features were gone, exposing white eyes with several rings.